it's about performance. Oh, it's about performance. Yes, it's about performance. It's about performance back on the job.
Hi, this is Guy Wallace, and this is the Pursuing Performance Podcast. Welcome. Today, I'd like to share some thinking for your adoption and/or adaption on performance enablers and performance measurement. My branded concepts, models, methods, tools, and techniques for HPT, Human Performance Technology, are EPPI, EPPI, Enterprise Process Performance Improvement. Now, my EPPI model set, if you will, portrays three sets of enabler variables. First, there's the process itself, and then there are the environmental enablers of that process, and then there are the human enablers who manipulate their environment or coexist within that environment to perform the process. Okay, let's look at the process itself. I learned this from Gary Rumler. First, look at the process. Second, look at the consequence system. So we'll cover both of those. But when we look at the process itself and its design, is it effective and is it efficient? Deficiencies might include, well, there is no defined process at all. So performers can't adhere to it because there isn't one. And the defined process, if there is one, might take too long. Or there are other issues in that defined process that aren't logical, and the master performers in the performance context don't use it. So the question Rumler always had is there a process? Are people adhering to it? And if not, why not? That was a wise set of words from the master himself back in 1981. So the process itself is always the number one culprit in the suspected culprits, the usual suspects, for performance issues. The problems and/or opportunities could be that one of the suspected causes for many performance issues is that there is no process. There are a multitude of processes with tremendous variation, so that one cannot predict the costs of the process, the quality that it will produce, and at what quantity. So the process itself is the first place to start. Once you understand that and the issues with that, you continue on to look at the other sets of enablers, the environmental enablers and then the human enablers. The environmental enablers required to support process performance are either adequate or they're not adequate in enabling the required performance levels. So the variables within the environmental enablers include data and information, materials and supplies, tools and equipment, facilities and grounds, budget and headcount, and culture and consequences. Let's revisit. The data and information includes all of the work orders, the instructions, the policies and procedures, and all the data and information available internally and sometimes externally. So we can get a lot of data and information to feed the process, to enable the process as the process is defined and utilized. Next, there's the materials and supplies. All the materials that are consumable that will be wasted in the effort to produce the final product and or service, and then whatever supplies are needed. That should be somewhat self-explanatory. Same thing with tools and equipment. What are the tools, equipment, machinery, vehicles, etc., computer-wise or otherwise, that are used in the process? What facilities and grounds? That's the buildings, the grounds outside, the parking facilities, the facilities such as utilities for communications, power, water, etc. Are they adequate to the needs of the process? Then there's budget and headcount. Now, the budget is usually adequate or not and includes the ability for management to use the budget to adjust the headcount based on the volume. If there's seasonal volatility in the volume of products and services needed, perhaps we needed to bring in temporaries. So do we have the budget to manage the headcount appropriately? And of course, the budget includes other things for capital and other expenses related to the performance of the process. Lastly, but not leastly, according to Rumler anyway, is the culture and consequences. These provide and reinforce the enterprise's cultural norms. Now, I won't be fooled to think that there are cultural norms across the entire enterprise. It's really the collection of those, and those most likely are collectives at the manager level or supervisor level. It's the work unit. It's the people that work together most frequently, whether that's face-to-face or via distance. So those are the enablers that come from the environment. They're not human in nature. Data and information, materials and supplies, tools and equipment, facilities and grounds, budget and headcount, and then the culture and the consequences that really are a major driver of performance. I mean, do we have negative consequences for good performance? Do we load up more performance requirements on the people that are good and let the others who are not as good slack off, so to speak? Okay, that brings us to the human enablers. Rumler always said he would look at the process first, look at the culture, look at the other environmental factors, and give the human being a break. Give them the shadow of a doubt. Look at them last, not assume that we fix the human and everything gets smelling like roses. So the categories that I have for human enablers are one's awareness, knowledge, and skill, or just abbreviated to knowledge and skills. And these come in many types and varieties, and one performer may need to be aware of what other performers need to know in detail, and yet another group of performers may need to know something to a skill level. So my building blocks, if you will, is that some people need to be aware about things, other people need to be very knowledgeable about things, and yet others need to have the skill in order to apply it in the various processes, more often known as workflows. I use 17 categories of knowledge and skills, and oh yeah, that's a lot. But if you're really trying to uncover what are the enabling knowledge and skills, what do people need to be aware of, knowledgeable about, and or skillful, I find my 17 categories useful for me to get a little bit more granular in the data that I generate. But what else do the humans bring besides their prior knowledge of awareness, knowledge, and skills? Well, in my model, they bring 3 different kinds of attributes and then their personal values. So I start off with physical attributes, and then there are psychological attributes, and there are intellectual attributes, and then personal values. So the human brings awareness, knowledge, and skills, physical attributes, psychological attributes, intellectual attributes, and their personal values, and those are either conducive to the performance requirements or they are not. They are inadequate. So we're really assessing for the adequacy of the current people in these processes to see, do they have what it takes? And if they don't, what do we need to give them? And of course, we think about this in kind of a Pareto sense, in that 20% of the solution might give you 80% of the results. So we don't need to go to overkill in the extreme, as I like to call it. All right, back to the attributes and values. Physical attributes, what does the process require in terms of maybe the 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, as well as height, weight, strength, endurance, etc. So there are many different ways to look at physical attributes, and your organization may have a set. I have my set. You can adopt and adapt or do further investigation into what are the physical requirements of the human beings in the processes, aka workflows. But physical attributes are just one type of attribute. The other is psychological and intellectual. Now, psychological attributes include people's attitudes, whether they're aggressive or not, or too passive, whether they're conscientious, are they introverted or extroverted, are they risk takers or not, are they too cautious, do they have a detail orientation, do they see the big picture, are they conceptual as well as being concrete? So that kind of overlaps a little bit with the intellectual attributes. Those include such things as my conceptual thinking ability, my concrete thinking ability. Can I be a strategic thinker? Can I be a tactical thinker? Do I think about processes and so on? So there are many different ways to look at intellectual attributes, including the old IQ test, which, as I understand it, is a great predictor of people's success in performance. The smarter you are, the better performer you are. So we can make people smarter, but sometimes that's not within their realm of capability. They don't have the capacity to get a whole lot smarter in terms of conceptual thinking or concrete thinking. Not everybody was born to be a switch hitter. All right, then there's the personal values. And I think this is very important. This includes, do they have a customer orientation, a customer satisfaction orientation? Are they okay with working in teams? Do they respect and value diversity, fairness, honesty? Do they have a work ethic? Do they think about the family and other significant values to your organization, to your marketplace, to your products and services, to the rest of your workforce, et cetera, et cetera? Do they fit from a personal values perspective? All right, so we've covered the three sets of enablers. There's the process itself. There's a bunch of enablers from the environment. There's a bunch of human enablers that we need to see. Do what we have, is it adequate to the needs of the process? Are there gaps in what we have compared to the needs of the process? So we would need to work on those. And we would want to work on those because we're trying to have a positive impact with what we are doing and with our interventions. And we want to make sure that we can declare how we were impactful. And of course, to do that, we're going to have to make sure that what we provide, the interventions that we manage, are impactful. So they've got to transfer in order to be impactful. So we've always got to be worried about transfer and what's going to happen. But back to the measures of performance. Ideally, you would have established a baseline of what's important. In Thomas F. Gilbert's book, the classic from 1978, Human Competence, he lists his measures of worthy performance. Worthy performance is what he often referred to as accomplishments. Other people might have said it's just really outputs. Either accomplishments or outputs can meet the stakeholder requirements and have good outcomes, or they can miss the stakeholder requirements and have poor outcomes. But the measures, there are three major categories, if you will: quality, quantity, and cost. This reflects both what Thomas Gilbert talks about and what I learned from the total quality management movement of the 1970s and 1980s. Quality, quantity, and cost is also known, and sometimes better known in layman's terms, such as better, faster, and cheaper. Same thing. Or use whatever language exists in your enterprise. Don't be introducing new things. You make the adaption. Don't expect other people to. So in Gilbert's book, he talked about quality having three aspects: accuracy, class, and novelty. And his definitions for all of this are in his book, Human Competence, and I won't try to go over those. And if you're really interested, you really should have his book for some really key aspects within that book. The book is a hard read from my perspective, but I think it's got a lot of great content. So quality is accuracy, class, and novelty. Quantity, or productivity in his words, are rate, timeliness, and volume. So what am I producing per hour, per day, per week, per month, per year, whatever the time bound is? And is it timely? Did we meet the deadlines in that? And what volume did we produce? I mean, if we were looking at rate, we would have said, 4 per hour and, given other things, what kind of volume? And another aspect of that is the yield. If I'm producing 100, but 2 get rejected in inspection, so I'm really producing 98, okay, that's taking both efficiency and effectiveness and looking at it together. The third category after quality and quantity is cost. There's labor costs, material costs, overhead, management costs, etc. Check with your Chief Financial Officer organization to get how your enterprise already looks at costs and you adapt to that. Again, Gilbert's definitions were on pages 45 through 47 in his 1978 book, Human Competence. Something good to have on your shelf or on your e-book collection. I've always liked these, but I've changed the wording to match what my clients used or to language that they could relate to. Gilbert's language was often too academic for my liking and for my successful use with my clients. My friend Carl Binder has changed Gilbert's 6 boxes, the behavior engineering model of Gilbert, into the 6 boxes of Carl Binder as influenced by Gilbert's BEM, behavior engineering model. All of this aligns to my saying, adopt what you can and adapt the rest. That's what we all need to do. I've been doing that my entire career. You should be doing it too. Don't be afraid to do it. But of course, always give proper attribution for your ideas. I mean, you probably didn't create these things out of whole cloth. It's up to you to make sure that what you adopt or adapt retrofits smoothly into your current philosophies, your processes, and your practices. Focus on the performance requirements and enable them. Thanks for listening. Tell your colleagues. Cheers.
It's about performance. Oh, it's about performance. Yes, it's about performance. It's about performance back on the job. It's about performance.